begin, Nanci started painting as a child and is essentially self-taught, which makes her all the more intriguing work. She paints with emotion, as you can see from the colorful style that she's developed. People and places are both very evident in her work, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go. And she brings to me a fresh perspective and a whimsical outlook on life. So, she and her husband Norm, who is here today, live in Scottsdale. So again, it's an informal discussion, so please join in, help us make this comments and questions meaningful to all of us. Okay? So let's start, Nancijoy, with you, since that background indicates that you've had your own self-taught kind of artistic journey. Give us a little bit about what inspired that in the first place and where you've come to this point.
Well, I've been coloring and drawing since I was little, and I was taught to color in between the lines. Okay, I'll talk louder. Can you hear me now? All right, I'll do the best I can. I always drew and painted and colored and was taught to always be in between the lines. And as I got into adulthood and started painting with oils in the beginning, I found out that you don't really have to stay in between the lines, and I just started painting, and I've been painting ever since. I really never had any lessons, but the couple of workshops that I've been able to take were very helpful in freeing me up and letting me go outside the lines.
Okay, so this is the first shot of your studio, and Nancijoy has given us a couple of comments on each one of these. So you'll see at the beginning it says, at the bottom, after the title, it says Wishful Thoughts 1995. So to me, that's very interesting. We love the colors. I'm sure all of us say, wow, what a nice palette. But there's some things that are kind of curious here. Why the empty palette? Why the flowers on the table or on the chair? What's going on in your mind, Nancijoy?
Okay. When I retired for the first time, we were living in Birmingham, Alabama, and it was the first chance I had to have my very own room to paint in, my own little studio, and I had always wanted my own space to work in and be quiet in and reflect in, and so I made it up. And the empty easel was just my, who knows what's going to come on this. It was just my expectations and my hopes for lots of fun and enjoyment and painting, and I wanted it to always smell good. So that's it.
So that's the anticipation of a journey through art. That's really nice.
That
These
was
are
it.
all oils?
No, I only use acrylics now. I tried oils in high school, and I'm too impatient. I like to have more immediate results, and I like to change things as I go. And with oils, I found I was very inhibited.
Okay, we're still kind of in your personal experience. This says, girlfriends, celebrating our friendship with my two artist buddies. First thing that occurs to me here is there are no faces, and everybody has the same dress on. So help us a little bit with what's going on here.
Okay. I was going to later say that I don't pre-plan too much and I don't think too much, I just paint. But in this one, I was so overwhelmed with the joy of having these two buddies that we paint. We've been painting together for about 12 or 13 years. And we're all so very different, very different. But there's so many things about my two friends that were so much the same about us. One of them is that we were all very supportive and very encouraging and very truthful with each other. And in that sense, we were very much alike. but we're so different that you have to imagine their faces.
Well, it really comes through. That's very, very poignant. Great. Okay, let's go on then. This is looks a little different from the others in that it's quite abstract. These are two different pieces, I believe, as we have
That's right.
on the wall in the
Right.
north hallway. They can be, as you saw out there, I think they were horizontally placed. So tell us a little bit what your mind's going through on these.
I was able to take a workshop with a very wonderful artist that I love, who has inspired me for many years.
Everybody say thank you. And Lauren worked
Anyway, I took this workshop. What?
on it.
Oh,
It's on.
it's on?
Yeah, but hold it towards your face.
I took this workshop, and it was called Breakthrough. And therefore, my painting that's on the wall, I have a painting called Breakthrough, because it was the first time that I was able to feel comfortable doing, I guess we're going to call it abstract, free-flowing paint, just letting it happen. And that was his mantra in the workshop, was just let it happen. And I did, and I loved it. So after that was finished, that was about 5 or 6 years ago. After I finished that, I started delving a little bit more into abstract. Hence, my first canvas was the one on the right, and I was enjoying it so much that I just kept going and made a second one.
But you didn't just go exclusively there, did you? Because here's ice cream, probably my favorite painting in the series.
Well, actually, that was for one of my grandchildren, I thought, because they all love ice cream. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make this, and the first one that says, Grammy, I want that, will have it. And no one ever said it. So it's in my kitchen.
Okay, this is obviously full of symbolism and interest. It's called Sundae, and the caption below it, you can't read it very well, it says, "Happy days, lots of family." You can really see those. The thing that catches my eye the most is that yellow balloon right in the middle, and then followed with a red balloon beyond it. So help us with that.
Okay. Grandma, aunts, cousins, parents, brother, family, wonderful Sundays during the summer, wonderful Sundays during the winter, hence the coats on the older ladies. Children, my grandchildren, wonderful Sundays, the end.
Looks like it's on the beach, although it could be.
There was beach, there was a lot of beach.
Can I interject?
Pardon?
Can I interject?
Please.
I was having an interesting conversation with Janet Robinson before we started, and we were talking about how...
Excuse me, this is my oldest son.
We were talking about how these pictures mean something different to everybody that sees them, and I think they're very experiential, and I agree that it feels like it's on the beach, and I have this specific memory, and I know that when we walk down the beach in Ocean City, Maryland, where we're from in Maryland, that's what I see. So to everybody, it's a very rich tapestry, and what it means to me and to my sister and to my wife may mean something different to everybody else, but it's just beautiful in every respect.
Thank you.
Wonderful, great. You were saying earlier about your breakthrough into abstract. Breakthrough seems to be the operative word. Certainly there's a tremendous amount going on in this. What was in your mind?
Well, it started out wanting to please the artist that I was.
And you?
That's how it started. No, not me. The art director of the workshop. That's how it started out. And I became so engrossed in it, in the movement of the paint and the rolling of We used rollers, I used my elbows, I used my hands, and the colors. And it really was a breakthrough, and that's why it's called a breakthrough workshop, because it definitely was for those of us who had not experienced the joy of doing abstract. So I think the freedom and the movement and the new experience part of it was what meant so much to me.
Sort of opened you up to
Absolutely.
doing new things in the after
Yes.
that.
There's one more coming that evolved from that workshop as well.
Any other questions? No? That's such a special piece, it seems
How
to
do
me.
you know when you're done?
You just have to put a sock in it.
This is called Flowers and Fruit, and the comment is, it's a still life. The colors here are absolutely beautiful to me. The palette is, to me, unusual combination, and I'm sort of intrigued by those two yellow flecks there in the middle of the vase. Why did they happen there?
Well, the light is on the vase,
Okay.
and that's about all I can say. The light is on the vase.
Kind of a
That's it.
reflection.
Right, yes. It's kind of a mixture of abstract and real. I set that up in my house, but the colors are completely different. They have nothing to do with what the reality was.
Did you start out with reality and then change the colors?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes, I
Isn't that
did.
interesting?
Oh, and I love lemons, and that's why lemons are there instead of other fruit.
Okay. Funky Village. The comment under this one is my imagination. Delightful color and shape and juxtaposition. This starts to be a kind of a nice blend between, seems to me, the abstract and more realistic.
This is just fun. I love color and I love architecture. And if you notice, so many of my works have architecture of some kind in them, some kind of building, some kind of structure. And sometimes I just start painting and what starts coming out ends up like this, or ends up in a different form of this. But it just looks like a funky village of all the little beautiful, colorful villages I've seen.
I was going to say, that's your cubist period.
My Cubist period.
That's right.
Okay.
I love the pointed buildings, perspective. Beautiful. Great.
Thank you. It just happened.
Okay, this is really removed totally from all the other pieces, it seems to me. This is called Just One Pair of Many at Budapest Memorial. This takes on really a serious tone, it seems to me. Interesting that there's a flower over one of the shoes. Give us a little perspective on where this is and why this attracted your attention.
I have 3 paintings that came from impact. Most of my paintings are just fun and they happen, but 3 of my collection are really from impact, and this is the first one. This is after the Budapest Holocaust Memorial. We were on a river trip and we spent an afternoon on the water of the Danube. I'm sure many of you have been there. And there were 60 pairs of these shoes, all in bronze, cast in bronze. And I've done a lot of reading, as you can imagine, about the Holocaust. And everything came rushing at me, and all of a sudden, a young woman walked up to this particular pair of shoes, and she was holding that flower, and she laid it on the shoes. And as she was walking away, I asked her if she minded if I took her picture. She didn't. And I took a picture of this exact scene, and I knew that I was going to paint it. And so I painted it.
For people who may not have been at that memorial, can you tell us why there's a memorial of shoes there?
I don't want to get gruesome, This was memorial of the victims of the Holocaust. 60 people were lined up on the riverbank. They were told to remove their shoes because leather was coveted. And so they took their shoes off, and then they were shot and allowed to fall into the river. And that's why the memorial is there with the shoes exactly as they were found, cast in bronze.
Thank you.
All right, next one is called Lamb Girl, after a road trip to Wyoming. Wyoming doesn't seem to play a part in this. Help us understand why there was a relationship with Wyoming to this.
Because I couldn't express the Grand Tetons or Yellowstone in my art. There was no way to do it. But what I was feeling on that road trip through Idaho and Montana and Wyoming and the Grand Tetons and all that magnificence was just peace. And there were so many farms and beautiful little sheeps. And all I could think about was how happy I was on that trip and all the quiet love that this looks like. And so that is my memory of that road trip, which I loved.
There's nothing like animal and the owner.
But you were
to
funny,
express
Ira.
that.
You told me the lamb and the girl look similar, and their faces look similar. I didn't think about that.
Well, you know what they say, if you're married for very long, you start to look alike. Now we're back to some, on to your travels and back to some architecture. If you'll recall the Funky Village before, certainly a interpretation, whimsical and graphical demonstration, but this is a totally different thing. Tell us about how this came about. Is that the Eiffel Tower in the background to kind of
Yes.
give it perspective?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, well, first of all, I've been a Francophile since I was in college. And in 1993, I think, we went to spend time in Paris. And we stayed in Montmartre because I didn't want to stay fancy. I wanted to stay where all the writers and artists stayed. And I wanted to haunt all the cafes and be a Francophile. So we stayed in this little hotel, and out my window was this scene, not these colors, of course. And I sketched it, and it's hanging now in my main room over my fireplace so that I can think of that trip every time I see it and remember how wonderful Paris used to be. If you get my drift.
Yes, we do. Another city scene, this says shopping in New York. Quite a different feel here. This is people-oriented. Is, in your mind, people what make the city?
Well, to me, it's a happy picture because you can be whatever you want in New York and San Francisco and Boston, anywhere you want. You can be anonymous, or you can be lonesome, or you can be happy, or you can be oblivious, or you can be observant, and you can people watch. And the buildings aren't really what's important. It's just what you're doing there and what you think is going on with all the people there that you pass, that you see.
See, my perspective would be totally different. I would see the buildings and not the people. So it's
Okay.
each to his own. That's interesting.
Okay.
This is called Red Trees, and it says from aspens, though they were really started out yellow. Beautiful color burst at the top there against the gray background. Could be anywhere. Tell us about your thinking in that respect.
Okay, I was in Aspen, and I was blown away by the aspen groves. I've never seen anything like it. I was raised on the East Coast and spent time in Colorado, but I had never been in Aspen to see the glorious aspens. And so I painted them, but the yellow just didn't have the impact of what it felt like when I saw them. So I changed it to red.
Okay, now we're in Botswana at a safari. This looks almost like kids' art, doesn't it? Wonderful whimsy and the crossing, everything coming together. That's really a beautiful perspective. What's in your mind?
We saw lots of kills on our safari, which were violent and horrible. We saw lots of stampeding of big game animals. I loved everything. I loved the violent animals. I loved the monkeys that stole our bananas and the baboons that broke into our tents at night. But when I saw the giraffes, it was like the epitome of everything I remember and loved about Africa, because they are so gentle, and they're a family, and there was nothing violent, there was nothing stampeding. They were just beautifully peaceful, loving creatures, and I always wanted to see them in person, and that was it. So that's how I remember my safari.
All right, this is called The Meeting, and this is from Travels in Russia. Everybody's sort of looking away. To me, there's not a lot of happiness here, even though the colors are happy.
That's right.
Would you reinforce that?
Drab, sad, impoverished, worn down, except for our guide in Russia, the entire trip through Russia. We had a guide that was like this, was vibrant and happy and intelligent and welcoming and instructive and brainwashed. This was 5 years ago.
Okay.
Anyway,
All right. So moving on, this is outside Budapest, strolling through the city. So again, here's more architecture, wonderful colors, wonderful takeoff on architecture and the shapes and sizes of things. Wonderful interpretation. This is the first place where you've really written anything on your paintings. A reason for that?
well, because what would it be if it wasn't Santander?
I don't know.
I guess it could be anything you want, but my first visit to Santander was with my daughter, probably in the early 90s, and we took a train ride from Budapest out to Santander. It's about an hour's train ride. And on that train ride, we met the most adorable little old man who spoke no English. He spoke a little Yiddish and a little German and a little French. And we spoke with him for an hour in that train trip. And then we went and spent the day in Santander. And it was just wonderful, to the point where I did go back years later.
You kind
But
of see him in that
I just
drawing.
remember being with my daughter and looking at all the cute little village places. It was a very old-fashioned kind of place. And there it is.
This is called Granada Kitty. She was there as we were strolling by on our first visit to Spain. A little different than most of your other pictures, in that it looks like this was just a specific memory
It was.
that you had when you were there.
Well, first of all, my first visit to Spain was a big impact. But staying in Granada at the Alhambra was very impactful. And we walked around, and there were multitudes of cats, just stray cats, all over Granada. I mean, it's known for that. And as we were walking out into the fringes in Granada, we passed by this dilapidated doorway with this one little kitty sitting in front of it. And I wanted to know who lived behind the door. I wanted to know who owned the kitty, if it was someone's kitty, if there were other kitties behind the door, and why was that kitty by himself? And so, this reminds me of that wonderful trip.
And it's sold already, so hands off.
It's so wonderful. All right, well, it makes two then.
Sold to the man in the front
He
row.
said it's sold.
It's sold. Can I ask the question? Do you take a picture of these things and then paint them?
Usually I do,
Yeah.
yes. Usually, or I sketch it. I
Right
either
there.
sketch it or take a
Or
photo.
take a picture?
Yes. This was a picture.
Yeah.
Okay, this is called Going Home, I guess maybe at the end of a trip. It's unusual, though. People at the bottom and structures at the top. Bring that together for us, if you would, Nancijoy.
Well, this again was my third attempt at abstract after my breakthrough workshop. And I decided I'm going to change my color palette. As you can see, I haven't done any of this color palette. So I started in the middle. And suddenly I saw these people at the bottom. They just kind of showed up. And as I kept enhancing and enhancing, I just kept thinking that maybe they were going home. Maybe they were going back to a better place.
Very nice. That's a beautiful metaphor, but it's also an interesting combination of real abstract and something that's very meaningful in literal terms. So,
Well, when you're blue, sometimes you can cheer yourself up by going home.
nice. That's nice. Great. Okay, and speaking of blue, here's a family that looks pretty blue to me, and maybe that's why that color is there. This was Sitting and Hoping, seen so many times in downtown Bangkok. So what does Thailand say to you?
This, to me, was a contrast between the opulence of the golden Buddhas and the bejeweled domes and all the show of Thailand, in contrast to the poverty of the families sitting on the streets begging for whatever they could get, food, money, clothing, anything. And it was pervasive where we were. We stayed in a very nice part of town, but no matter where we were, there were mothers and children begging on the streets. And I just couldn't do it in black and blue, so I did it with impact in red.
Seems like so much the contrast today of the very opulent and the destitute.
That was true in Russia, too. That was very true in Russia, with the opulence.
Here's another picture that's sold. Congratulations again.
Oh, thank you.
It says, after visiting the Amalfi Coast, Italy, 2009. Again, here we go with more architecture that's of a different kind of a style. But the colors seem to be the same there. What fun there is in that. It expresses to me anyway the excitement and fun of the place.
Exactly.
Is that where you are?
Well, the fun for sure, but the part of the excitement was our friend who was driving in charge of the drive. I can't even begin to describe the fear that I had.
I know it well.
Do you?
Yes, I do.
Seriously. And yet I wouldn't have traded that for anything, but I mean the motorcycles and the cars and everything. But this to me was just, you know, I was sketching and picturing and drawing, and to me this was the Amalfi Coast. And I loved it, and it hung in my kitchen, and I would just look at it and take myself back there, and I will go back. I will.
With no fear.
And of course, the Blue Grotto and the Isle of Capri were outstanding. And
Okay, here's another instance of verging toward the abstract, but with a lot of realism in there at the same time. But what are we talking about? It says ice skating in the city after Rockefeller Center and named for my youngest granddaughter. But I suspect this didn't start out that way.
well, it started out as a moody landscape, i.e. the background, and suddenly I saw an ice rink, and I remembered Rockefeller Center, and I remembered San Francisco with all the wonderful fun times of ice skating there. And that's what happened. And when my youngest granddaughter saw it for the first time, right after I finished it, she said, "Grammy, that looks like people are ice skating in a city." I named it Ice Skating in a City.
Wow, that's really fun. And one of my favorites because it's verges on black and white. All right, Puerto Rico. One afternoon in San Juan, and these are two different images that come together, can
Yeah,
be
they
used
really
together.
look better when they're separated a little bit.
Mhm. Okay. This is called Birth. When my first grandchild was born, she looked like a beautiful rosebud. When I looked at this, I thought, I'm looking at it upside down. And
Yes, you did.
but I wasn't. So
But Ira, I
explain-
told you if you want to hang it in your house, you can turn it.
You can turn it.
You can. It's okay.
Even sideways. So go through your mind's eye when you were
Okay.
doing this.
26 years ago, I saw my first granddaughter. And I hadn't been painting because I was very busy working. And after I saw my first granddaughter in her little bed in the nursery when she was born, all I could think of was this beautiful little pink flower that was going to grow into this magnificent, beautiful red rose flower. And her little lips looked like, just like a little rosebud. And I don't know why that's it, but that's it.
That's a wonderful interpretation, all year long.
It is.
Very nice. And to conclude, here's my brother. From behind my precious grandsons. Shows the two of them together. I'm sure they're larger today than they were in that picture, but maybe the bond is still there.
They're now 15 and 12. This was actually in California. Norman, my husband, and I were walking behind them after dinner one night, and I just saw them walking into the future, holding each other up, embracing each other and being best friends always, and thinking of my sons, and took the picture and came home and painted it. And
So
it's not for
impressive.
sale, by the way.
I wouldn't for a minute. All right. Any other comments or questions about what we've seen this morning in this trip down memory lane?
Hi, Jill.
Yes.
Have you ever found yourself working into a piece?
You have to talk a little
Have you
louder.
ever found yourself working into a piece that you thought was completed, but years later going back into it?
Absolutely. I'll tell you one quick anecdote. In 1973, I painted something for my dining room in the house that we lived in at the time. And it just came out of my head, and it was dancers under the moonlight. And my dad framed that picture. He built the frame, it's large. And that picture sat around in basements and attics for 50 years.
And offices.
And offices,
I know.
yes. And it got distorted and broken, and 2 years ago, I resurrected it. I never touched the frame. The frame stands as it is. I repainted it exactly as it was in colors to go with my bedroom. And it's hanging there now.
Very good.
And it's not for sale.
And it's not for sale.
Yes.
Nancijoy, what is your next painting going to be?
Cosette, I have no idea. I don't plan usually. Just those three were planned from impact. And I honestly don't know, but I have a studio Tuesday, and then I'll decide.
Anxious to see.
Well, thank you all very much for coming, and as I said, this is a guilt-free trip to the Krispy Kreme department over there, so I hope you'll enjoy it before you go. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you.